The following is a production of Texas Lutheran University. For more information, please visit tlu.edu.
I'm Mike Howard, and I'll be chatting with you about an hour. What time are we quitting? 9:15. Flat butt syndrome should have got most of you by then, I would imagine. All right, listen, I'm a neuropsychologist by trade, allegedly. I actually started out in the brain business when I was 16 years old. I'm from a little town in Kansas called Autonomic. Town about 4,000 people. And we have a claim to fame in Kansas. Sitting right on the outskirts of Osawatomie is the Osawatomie State Hospital. It's got had back then 1,800 psychiatric patients in it. When I was a kid, I had 4 aunts. They're all RNs, and they all worked up the state hospital. And I found out when you turned 16, you could go to work up there as a student psychiatric aide, so I did. And I worked up there for about 2.5 years on dementia units, on a unit that treated people with depression, on a kiddie unit where we had kids with autism and severe childhood schizophrenia, ADHD, and stuff like that. Then I spent the last 6 months I worked up there working on a chemical unit where they treated substance abuse. Want to guess what kind of substances they had in 1962? What do you think they were? Had 40 people in this unit. What kind of substance problem do you suppose they had? No guess at all? Think it was cocaine, methamphetamine? Think they were slugging cough syrup? All you had back then were alcoholics and heroin addicts. That's all you had back then. Very different kind of deal than now. Matter of fact, back at that time, the National Institute for Drug Abuse says that probably only about 4 million people out of 240 million people had ever even tried an illegal drug back then. Want to guess how many people out of 307 million people in this country now have tried an illegal drug? 110 million. From 4 million to 110 million in about 45 years. That's a huge, huge difference. But anyway, after that, I flunked out of college the next 2 years. Sounded like fun to me. I did have a lot of fun, actually. I played baseball in minor leagues for a while. Then I went in the Army and had some interesting vacations in places called Vietnam. When I came back from there, college looked pretty good, so I stayed in it for 10 years. I ended up with 300 hours before I graduated. I had literally 3 majors and 4 minors. I majored in cellular physiology, biochemistry, and finally in psychology, and had a bunch of minors and other kind of things too. But since then, I went on to get a PhD in neuropsychology, and for the last 30, 35 years, I've run brain injury units and stroke units and psychiatric hospitals and rehabilitation hospitals and addiction units and chronic pain programs and preventive health programs. I sort of have ADHD, as you probably already figured out. I've actually been a neuropsychologist about 30 years, and I've had 13 jobs in 7 states. I just keep wandering around doing different kind of stuff. But I taught in 4 medical schools. About 8, 9 years ago, I took a job with a company that does continuing education stuff for doctors, nurses, therapists, psychologists, social workers, people like that. And I just give all day 6-hour lectures a couple 3 days a week. That's what I've been doing on all sorts of different topics. The one I picked today to talk to you about today, I read your textbook. I kind of like the idea of teaching intro to psych the way they teach you with those 40 studies. But I found one particular kind of thing that's not really covered a great deal in there. And it may be something that might be of semi-importance to a college student. That's got to do with stress. So I thought I'd talk about that today. It's something that fascinates me a great deal. I've actually done some research on this, and I met some of the big whizzos in the field that actually are involved in this. This is one of the most basic aspects of human life that actually exists out there. Now, yesterday I sat down and knocked out a little outline for you, and I'll sort of follow along that, but I don't mind taking a few questions and doing it any way you want to do it, because I do an all-day 6-hour seminar on this topic, and it's kind of fascinating, really. You really, in order to understand kind of what happens in this thing we call the stress response, you sort of have to understand a little bit about your genetic code, because the stress response that every one of us in this room undergoes one way or another. You're going to find I wander around a lot, so you're going to be busy back there. I kind of wandered one place back to the other. Is really built into your genetic code. And there's a lot of fascinating things about your genetic code. You know what DNA is, right? What's its purpose? And I used to have a little thing up in my office when I was teaching classes and all that. It used to drive my fellow psychologists crazy. I had life up there. Underneath it was a double helix of DNA in a cell, because that's really what life is. So DNA, what is it? Your genome. You got 3.2 billion pairs of 4 little chemicals, adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine, that bond up with each other to make this little double helix that we call our DNA, which in turn is put around little proteins called histones like this, crumpled up together in something called chromatin, and is divided into 23 pairs of chromosomes, and every one of your 500 trillion body cells has it in there, except for your sperm and egg cells. Has all that nuclear material, we call it. So this DNA stuff, what's its purpose? What did it exist for? How come I had this little thing up there on the wall that said life and DNA is under it? Because it's about survival. 2 kinds of survival. Now, what do you think those might be? What's the purpose of DNA? Nobody knows? Never had Biology 101 yet? What DNA actually does? Well, it's about survival. It's about 2 kinds. It's about survival of our species, number 1. Most of the time, our species have wandered this earth for about the last 200,000 years that Homo sapiens, our species, has been around. Whether we were going to make it or not was up in doubt. And DNA is about passing on our genes down to our offspring so they can pass them on and our species can survive. It's about survival of our species. But in order for us to survive as a species, you have to survive long enough to pass on your genes. You got to make it to 13, 14, or 15 where you can actually pass on offspring. Your genetic code is all about your survival. It's about you surviving long enough so we can pass on our genes so somebody else can survive. And this human genome is really pretty much an amazing thing. There's 3.2 in humans. Now, you know, we mapped the whole human genome. It's called the Human Genome Project. And a guy named Watson, Jim Watson, kind of was behind this whole thing. It went on for years, cost billions of dollars, where we finally mapped every single little nucleotide in human DNA. And now, of course, we've mapped the DNA of thousands and thousands of people and many hundreds of other different species. So we know exactly what's in this strand of DNA. If you stretched out your DNA, you know how many genes, you know what a gene is? When you put together certain of these little nucleotides, these little adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosines together, certain of them will form a certain area on that DNA and will convert to make a chemical called messenger RNA, which goes to your ribosome and makes proteins. It's all about making proteins for your body. How many different proteins you think you have in your body? About 200,000 of them. 200,000 different proteins, all made of the same little 20 or 22 amino acids, all in a little sequence like this. It makes all sorts of different proteins in your body, 200,000 of them. Now, you have a certain number of genes that coded to make you who you are. You have any idea how many genes make a human? How many genes actually code to make you? You have any idea at all? 30,000, about 30,000 of them. Now, what percentage, if you stretched out your DNA like this, all your human DNA, what percentage of it do you think actually codes to make you who you are? What do you think? Want to take a shot at it? It's 3%. 97% of your DNA doesn't do a blessed thing that we know of, except give us shows like CSI Miami. Because when you do genetic coding and typing about who did what, you use a pattern of junk, we call it junk DNA. 97% of your DNA doesn't do one lousy thing that we know of. It's probably left over from millions of years, we don't know. As a matter of fact, you have a gene for a tail in there. It just never kicks in. All sorts of genes, they never activate in your entire genetic code. Only 3% of your DNA makes you who you are, you know? And do you think your DNA is pretty much like the person sitting next to you? Look at the person sitting next to you. How much of their DNA do you think is exactly like yours? Stand up, Laura. Stand up. How much of her DNA and my DNA do you think are different? You have any idea? Now, she looks like a different sex to me, I'm just guessing. But different body shape, different eye color, hair color, whatever else. Looks a little different than me. How much of our DNA you think is different? Anybody have any idea? 1/10 of 1%. The person sitting next to you, every other person on this planet, Homo sapiens, our species is we're very homogeneously genetic. We're almost exactly the same from person to person. Any other human being on this earth, despite the fact you want to kill and murder each other right and left across this planet, every other human being on this earth is only 1/10 of 1% different genetically than you. We're almost exactly the same. Thanks. What's the closest species to us genetically? Anybody know? Chimpanzees and bonobos. How much of their DNA is exactly like ours? Have any idea? 98.4%. Only 1.6% of your DNA is different than a chimp. But that's a pretty important 1.6%. It gives you a different brain, a whole bunch of different kind of things that make a huge difference. How much of your DNA you think is the same as a mouse? 90%. How about a fruit fly? How much of your DNA is the same as a fruit fly? 60%. Life is life. Half the biological reactions that go on in your body go on in a banana. Life is life. Life's about cells and nucleus and ribosomes that are in there and how they form. A whole bunch of chunk of your DNA is all about making the same things all life pretty much is made of. And that DNA in us, why is it important in this discussion here? Because it hasn't changed hardly at all in about the last 14,000 years that human beings have been around. 13,000 years ago, we were nomadic hunter-gatherers living in the Stone Age. And your genetic code has not changed hardly one iota since then. It's almost exactly the same. You take a Stone Age guy and shave his face and put him in a suit, and you take a Stone Age woman, shave her legs and put her in a dress, they're us. We're them. Except something's changed since the Stone Age, which is what? We haven't changed. Our genes are just the same. And remember, your genes are all about survival. But something has changed since the Stone Age, and what's that? That's the environment. Now, when I drove into Seguin to come down here with Laura to do this thing, this didn't look much like the Stone Age out there. But your genetic code is designed, as I told you the first thing this morning, to help you survive. Trouble is, it's designed to help you survive back in the Stone Age, not today. And the world has changed tremendously. Your genetic code doesn't know it. Your genetic code still is the same. Our genes change incredibly slowly. It takes thousands and thousands and thousands of years for our genetic code to change. You know how many humans there are on this planet now? 7 billion. Let's suppose you got a really good gene from your mom and daddy that's going to help our species survive better, a mutation. Almost all mutations are bad. What we call single nucleotide polymorphisms, almost all of them are bad. But let's say you got a good one. You got a good gene that's going to help a slave not get heart disease or not get certain kind of cancers. How many copulations do you think it's going to take for her to pass that down to 7 billion people? Our species changes very slowly. We're almost the same critter we were 13,000 years ago in the Stone Age, and that gives us a kind of significant problem because some of the very same genes that helped us, our species, survive back in the Stone Age, guess what they conspire to do now? They conspire to make you physically and mentally ill and to kill you in this environment. Your genetic code was never designed to live in Seguin, Texas in 2012. It was designed to live in a hunter-gatherer environment like, say, the foray in Papua New Guinea right now. You know there are 50 Stone Age cultures left on this planet? 10 of them, like the foray in Papua New Guinea, have had almost no contact with the outside world. They live pretty much like we did 13,000 years ago. And if you read a fabulous book called Guns, Germs, and Steel, written by Jared Diamond, who talks a lot about the foray, you learn how a Stone Age culture lives back then. It's a lot different than us. And some of the very same genes that helped us survive back in the Stone Age, unfortunately, conspire to kill us now. And that's in your little handout there, and you see it pretty much up on the screen up here. What do you think the single biggest threat to our species was back in the Stone Age? What do you think the thing that killed more humans, probably wiped more than anything else back then? There was no agriculture. There was no food storage. If you ate something, you had to catch that sucker that day, or you had to dig it out of a tree, or you had to find it someplace. You lived from day to day to day. People current Stone Age cultures walk about 6 to 18 miles per day, just searching for food, hunting and gathering. Tremendous sex and gender role differences, by the way. Tremendous between hunters and gatherers. Most primitive cultures are extremely wired, very different sexually back and forth. You do very different kinds of things. And survival, getting enough, just enough chow to survive is really what it's all about. The problem with that, of course, is your body comes genetically designed to protect you against that, to protect you against starving to death. Anybody have any really clue for what are the major reasons why that 68% of Americans are now overweight or obese? You think that's normal? You think being overweight or obese is normal? Of course it is. Of course it is. Because your genetic code is designed to make you fat, but you're never supposed to be. You see, how do you think you survive starvation? How long do you think you can live if you don't eat? Let's say you don't eat and you stay hydrated with water. How long do you think you'll live? What's your life expectancy? Anybody have any idea? Take a guess. How long? Well, it's actually been psychologically studied. Not psychologically, it's been actually studied. It was studied, unfortunately, by a group of people that you wouldn't, by Joseph Mengele, that infamous Nazi physician who ran the Auschwitz concentration camp, where they starved, we think, several thousand people to death. They only picked up a few hundred records when it was liberated at the end of World War II. But apparently, depending upon what kind of physical condition you're in, if you don't eat but stay hydrated with water, you'll live about 2 to 6 weeks and it's over. And your body comes designed to protect you against that. You want to guess how? Every day, a certain number of calories are needed by your body to operate. You're going to use a certain number of calories for your metabolism to work. It's called your basal metabolic rate. And then, that's just to keep most of your heart, your brain, and your gut working. That's where most of your calories are used by. And then, of course, whatever you're doing during the day, on top of that, that goes on top of that a little bit. And then that's the total number of calories your body's going to use today. Well, your body comes amazingly designed to take the calories you bring in through your diet and convert them into long-chain fatty acids, tie them together with a glycerol molecule. We call that a triglyceride, and shove it into your fat cells, your adipocytes, to protect you against what? Starvation. Your body still thinks you're living back in the Stone Age. It doesn't know you're living here. Your body still thinks the biggest threat to you is starving to death. So when you consume calories over and above the ones you use, they're being shoved into your fat cells to save you from starving to death. And the other thing is, we're all genetically designed to be pigs. When you sit down at the table, you want to eat to your belly's what? What? Full. You know why? How do you think you eat in the Stone Age? How do you think Stone Age cultures eat, like the Fori in Papua New Guinea now? How do you think they eat? Sporadically. Whenever they find it, they shove their mouths full of stuff as big as they can. Shove it into their mouths so they can eat as much as they possibly can and store the most fat they can, because to save themselves against starving to death. But we can sit down and also when you eat, your belly's full, a chemical message goes up into your brain. In a little area called the ventral tegmental area nucleus accumbens circuit, which is just a big word that means that's where you feel pleasure. And a chemical called dopamine goes woohoo up like this when your belly's full and you feel good and you want to do it again. You'll find out that most addictions are based on our food addiction. There are 3 tastes of food also, that when you taste this food in your mouth, these 3 tastes, you also feel pleasure in those pleasure areas. These 3 tastes of food didn't exist much in the Stone Age. They don't exist much now in the natural world, but food processors and manufacturers now shove them and infuse them into processed foods, so we'll be addicted to them and want to taste them. What do you think the 3 addictive tastes are? Salty, sweet, one more, fat. There are almost no naturally fatty, really sweet, really salty, or really fatty things out there in the world. We shove those things in because our bodies are left over in the Stone Age to want them. Put all that together. And because our bodies are designed to shove extra calories in our adipocytes, we don't walk 24 hours, we don't walk these 6 to 18 miles per day like we did before, so we don't use this energy now. Since the Industrial Revolution, the Information Age Revolution, we spend our time sitting on our gluteus maximi back here. We don't walk around like we used to. We don't exercise like our species is supposed to. And so when you look around and you see this much overweight in our culture, it's perfectly normal given your genetic code genes, this genetic code you got from the Stone Age and the world we live in now. You weren't supposed to have McDonald's and Burger Kings and Kentucky Fried Chickens around and grocery stores. Now our world has changed. So obesity and diabetes, type 2 diabetes that permeate our world right now are basically largely due to the fact that we simply, our bodies aren't designed to kind of live in this world. Also, you're gonna, 3 or 4 days without drinking water, if you're walking that far, you're gonna drop. So your body's designed to hold on to water and hold on to sodium and keep water in your body so that you won't, basically you won't die of thirst back in the Stone Age. Today, there are 74 million Americans with hypertension. And one of the reasons is your body holds on to sodium, which didn't exist much back then. We fill ourselves full of it now. And the fact that hypertension is a huge deal. Also, we bled to death back in the Stone Age. I mean, you know, you're walking 6 to 18 miles a day, and you know, you're getting cut, you're getting lacerated. You've got groups of saber-toothed tigers looking at you like your lunch out there and taking bites out of people. The people who clotted their blood up didn't bleed out and they didn't get infected. And they survived and passed on those genes to us. So in your bloodstream, almost all you in this room, you got high levels of blood clotting factors, things like fibrinogen, thromboxane, stuff like that tie your little platelets together that form nice little blood clots so you don't bleed out. Unfortunately, in the world we created now, what do you think is going to kill the largest bunch of you in this room? What's going to kill the largest group of people sitting in this room? What do you think it is? Your life's going to end, trust me on that. This is going to happen. What do you think is going to end it? A blood clot that forms in one of the 3 main arteries that feed your heart, you're going to die of a heart attack, or a blood clot that blocks one of the 6 main arteries that feed your brain, you're going to die of a stroke. That's 5 out of 6 strokes. That's what's going to kill the largest group of people in this room. The very same thing that saved us 13,000 years ago. So these very genes that were set up to help us survive back in the Stone Age conspire to give us most of the diseases that are going to kill us now, like heart disease and stroke and diabetes, hugely. These are largely due to the fact called genetic environmental discordance that our genes aren't matched up with the world around us. But we're not talking today about necessarily straight heart disease and stroke. We're talking about stress. And the reason why this whole prelude I've given you here is your brain's left over from the Stone Age too. Your brain's a survival organ left over from the Stone Age too, and it operates by the very same principles that some of those other parts of your body did 13,000 years ago. Your brain's designed to help you survive, and a response in it to threats around you called the stress response is left over in you from the Stone Age. So if you slept outside the cave, let's say, back in the Stone Age 13,000 years ago, and you look over to the left, and there's a saber-toothed tiger looking at you like your lunch, this thing we call the stress response, in 1 second, kicks in, and you are in an absolute mode of saving your life. Because it doesn't make nothing else matters now. Anything else in your body is second nature, second change down the tubes. If you don't survive in the next few seconds, it's all over. It's done. Finished. It's over. You walk out in the parking lot at night. Some dude jumps up 2 cars away with a knife in his hand and comes after you. If you don't survive that, it doesn't make any difference what else goes on in your body. It's over. So built into all of us is this lightning quick thing we call a stress response that kicks in to save us from a saber-toothed tiger attack that's coming after us right now, 13,000 years back in the Stone Age. We're still getting ready to prepare for that. This response was designed in the Stone Age to kick in every once in a while when you wandered outside the cave and a tiger was going to eat you, and you had to escape from it very quickly. It kicks in without you even thinking about it. That's how automatically almost this thing kicks in to save us back then. The problem is, and you're going to see this pretty quickly, the problem is our stress system was never designed to kick in over and over and over and over and over again. It was designed to pop in every once in a while and then kind of go back to baseline. Everything's kind of cool. It wasn't designed to kick in over and over and over and over and over again. Back in the Stone Age, it would help you survive a saber-toothed tiger attack. Today, we stress ourselves out about all kinds of things that have nothing to do with saber-toothed tiger attacks. Our stress system was never designed to live in the world that we've created now, where we can work ourselves up about just about anything over and over again all day long. And when you go into the stress response over and over and over and over and over again, you begin to create diseases, mental diseases, like anxiety, like depression, like insomnia. And these conditions become huge risk factors to develop physical disorders like heart disease and stroke and diabetes and cancers and inflammatory disorders like chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And what I just gave you, those are the 5 leading causes of death. Every single one of them. The health of your body is massively dependent upon what goes on inside your brain. Your brain and your body, Hippocrates told us this 2,400 years ago. What goes on in your body goes on in your mind. What goes on in your mind goes on in your body. You think you could think yourself into an early grave? Can you? You better believe you can. Your own thoughts, the very same thing that helped our species dominate this planet, which is our ability to outthink every other critter on this planet, can become our own worst enemy, depending upon the kind of things you're thinking about. Our thinking is what allowed us to dominate this planet, and thinking gets us into the trouble we're in right now. Now, how many nervous systems do you think you have? If we're talking about the brain's part of one of your nervous systems. You have any idea how many nervous systems you got? Well, you can see on the screen, you got 3. You got a central nervous system at your brain and spinal cord. You might know what the second nervous system is? Well, you got a brain and spinal cord, you got to connect these out to your body, right? You got to connect them out to your arms and feet and genitals and all that. So coming out of the base of your brain, you have 12 sets of nerves that come out either side deep in your brain called the brainstem, called cranial nerves. And they allow your brain to operate your face and your mouth and make these words come out and all that sort of thing. Make your eyes move around. Then you have 31 pairs of spinal nerves that come out of your spinal cord that go out to the rest of your body, so the rest of your body will operate. But you have a third nervous system. You have a third one. And that's the one we're going to talk about mostly all the rest of the hour or 45 minutes or so we're going to be in here. The third one's called the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is what the stress response is all about. The autonomic nervous system comes down your spinal cord like this and comes out of your spinal cord and connects your brain to all the organs and glands of your body. So it connects your brain to your stomach, to your liver, your intestines, to your pancreas, to all your immune glands, to all of your skin, are all connected to your brain through this thing called the autonomic nervous system. And the weird thing about the autonomic nervous system is it's got 2 parts to it, and you can only be in one part at a time. One of them is called the parasympathetic response. That's the one most of you are in right now. That's called the relaxation response. Herb Benson, Harvard, calls it the relaxation response. When you're in the parasympathetic part of your autonomic nervous system, your heart rate's down, you're digesting your food real well, you're just kind of hanging out. You got what's called alpha waves tinkling around up here inside your head up here. Not worried much about anything at all whatsoever. Just your blood pressure down, your respiration's down, your body temperature's down. You're just kind of hanging out. Nice and relaxed. But if you're confronted by some kind of threat, physical or environmental, or maybe you just imagine a threat because your brain doesn't know the difference. Your stress system doesn't know the difference between an imaginary threat and a saber-toothed tiger getting ready to slice your throat out. Your brain doesn't know the difference. They're all the same. So either some threat comes along. You've been cut, you're freezing, or you see somebody coming at you with a knife, or you just imagine you've got a test this afternoon that's driving, and that's driving you into stress, and your brain doesn't know the difference in any of them. It reacts the same to all of them. And puts you into that time, into this sympathetic part of your autonomic nervous system that we call the stress response. So important thing to understand is you can't be in both. You can't be scared and relaxed at the same time. You can't be in stress or not in stress at the same time. You're either relaxed and parasympathetic or you're stressed and sympathetic. There ain't nothing else you can do. And what drives is even, you've got a nice little thing in one of your studies by Paul Ekman, I don't know where you got to it yet or not, about what drives it is one emotion. One emotion creates the stress response. Now you'll learn if you read about Paul Ekman in this little study you've got there. He's a fascinating guy, really. He studies the facial expression of emotions. You have 43 facial muscles. They can make 10,000 different facial expressions. Well, that's the number of permutations you got. It's a huge number. Some of whom are pretty important, actually. And Paul found that there are 6 basic emotions that all human beings on this planet, when you feel them, you have the same facial expression to them, no matter if you're sitting in this room or you're a 4A tribes person over there in Papua New Guinea, which he actually studied about this. You have the same facial expression to all these 6 emotions, these basic emotions. Anybody have any idea what those 6 basic emotions you have are? No guess? Fear, anger, disgust, surprise, happiness, and sadness. And when you feel those, 5 of those 6 are negative, by the way, to tell you how wired your brain comes for negative emotions, because that's what saved us back in the Stone Age, probably. Now, fear, anger, disgust, surprise, happiness, sadness, which one of those things you think fires up your stress response? Fear. That's exactly right. It's fear. Now, an interesting guy came along named Walter Cannon back in the early 1900s. He was a fascinating guy. He was a Harvard physiologist. And he found out that when people go in this stress response, he claimed they went into the 4 F's of survival: fear, freeze, fight or flight response. Now the fight or flight response, you probably heard of it, it's still stuck around. When fear ignites your brain, often you'll freeze right away. You know why that's probably built into us? When you're a prey animal in Africa and you see something coming after you like a cheetah or saber-toothed tiger, what do you think those animals almost immediately do? They freeze just for a second, because a lot of those vision systems are based upon movement, and you freeze. But then if it's coming after you, you only got 1 or 2 choices. You can fight it or run away from it, and that's about it. Now, there wasn't many studies done on women in the early 1900s in either medicine or psychology. Today we know that females a lot react a little different to this stress response. A lot of gals, not all, but a lot of gals, react not with a fight or flight response, but with a what? A tend and befriend response, as a matter of fact. And it responds somewhat differently to stress than males. They didn't know that back when Cannon was around. But the interesting thing, Walter thought that this stress response would happen and then immediately shut down, and you'd go back to baseline. You'd go back to the parasympathetic state. Turns out he wasn't exactly right about that. He also found something else out. When you go into a stress response, your bowel sounds stop. All that going down there, your peristaltic movement stop. Your bowel sounds stop when you go into a stress response. As a matter of fact, you've known that since 1833. Because in 1833, a fabulous little thing was written up. Some guy had gotten a huge penetrating wound in his abdomen, fell on some post or some kind of thing. And the doctors in the medical school in Boston were all around him with all their interns around him at the same time. And they were all looking at this big wound here, and it stopped. They got the bleeders cut off, but it was all really red and all that, because you look at it really in your internal guts in here, basically we're looking there. But whenever this dude would get mad or get really frightened about something, that red color would go white. And you lose blood flow to your gut when you get into a major stress response. And no, the guy was probably doing it because they were sitting there looking at him instead of sewing him up. I mean, that's what's probably making him mad. But they're all just standing around watching this guy, and every time he would get upset about something, all that red tissue would just turn white. Because we now know in the stress response, your blood goes to your big muscles. so you can survive, and away from your digestion and other areas. I mean, hugely your blood flow changes hugely like that. Walter Cannon also I stuck voodoo on there because one of the interesting things about him is he studied voodoo about the time of World War II in the early 1940s. He went to Haiti and looked at voodoo shamans down there, and he found that voodoo shamans sometimes would put a curse on somebody and tell them they were going to die at the next full moon, and about 60% of them would drop dead. And now some of them were cheating, they were poisoning people and everything else. Some of these guys you couldn't trust. They're kind of like politicians these days. But some of these people just dropped dead. Probably what we now call stress cardiomyopathy, where you basically, I'll tell you probably why this happens in a second. When you go into stress response, your peripheral arteries shut down. That's why your hands are cold when you're scared. So you don't get much blood flow out there. But your coronary arteries around your heart, they expand because your heart's beating like crazy to go in there. In some people, when stress goes on and on and on, or stress is horrible, the exact opposite thing happened, and these arteries shut down, and they can squeeze together. Literally go into a squeezing down to the point that you may block enough artery going to your heart that people can die of a heart attack just from stress alone, which we think kind of happened in voodoo. He sort of did that a long time ago. Then along came a guy named Hans Selye, who's sort of the godfather of stress back in the 1930s and 40s, and he began to find out that people could get sick from stress, that stress could make you sick. Matter of fact, he called it basically the syndrome of just getting sick. And he found out about it, as you can see, because he was a clumsy rat handler. He actually originally thought that stress happened, since stress and anxiety and depression happen more in women than men, he thought it might be due to ovarian hormones, one of the estrogens, estrone, estriol, estradiol, one of those. Well, one of the dudes down the hall, one of the other researchers, was extracting from rats, ovarian hormones out of rats. And so Selye got this ovarian hormone, and every day he would go in, and he had a bunch of rats over here, and he would inject them with lots of this ovarian hormone because he thought it would cause a stress response. And over here, in his control group, he injected them with just normal saline, just salt water. That's it. And after a few weeks of this, he went over to his group that he'd been injecting these hormones in, and he opened a rat, opened them up and looked inside. You know what he found? He found stomach ulcers. And he found that there are adrenal glands over here that basically are shooting out, you're going to find out pretty quickly, all your stress hormones. They were huge. They'd all enlarged because they were shooting out so many stress hormones. And then the immune glands of these rats, like the thymus, had shrunk down to nothing. So he went around doing handstands. He thought he was going to get famous and all this sort of thing. But what do you have to do to finish your study? What do you have to look at before you finish your study? You've looked at your experimental group. Now what do you have to look at? Your control group. When he opened them up, what do you think he found? Stomach ulcers, enlarged adrenal glands, and shrunken immune tissue, just like over here, and he cried all over the place. Well, he had a lab assistant working for him that said, you know, Dr. Selye, maybe it's not really this hormone that's doing it. Maybe it's the fact that we're scaring the crap out of these rats. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. Selye was not good at handling rats. Some people good, and I've done 3 or 4 rat studies. You got to be get along with these rats, you know. Well, he'd drop them. He'd chase them behind. He'd get their broom, get them out behind these things like he's scaring the snot out of rats, about both bunches of them, you know. And it was the fear of him coming in and being rough with them, sticking needles in them, and he wasn't good with the syringe. He'd be sticking the needle in them 4 or 5 times to get him where he wanted him. No wonder these rats are all scared to death. Trouble is, he was scaring both of them to death. And he began to realize that stress around us could make you sick. And we would go into an alarm response, then the body developed resistance to it, and eventually we go into exhaustion, and our stress hormones would run out, and we would just go into exhaustion, except there's something wrong with that. That's why he didn't win a Nobel Prize, actually. He should have. Because we don't go into exhaustion, actually. You just keep spewing out stress hormones over and over again if you keep stressing yourselves out. And those stress hormones become the disease itself after a while. And that's how chronic stress becomes a killer. Because There's an old country song out there now, the road goes on forever and the party never ends. Well, that's exactly what happens in stress. It goes on forever and ever and ever, and you don't run out of stress hormones. They just eat you up over time. When stress begins, three major parts of your body get involved in producing the hormones. In particular, you see the two up here, adrenaline or epinephrine and cortisol that tend to run this response, begin when you get a stress response. And what happens is, now I've laid this out for you pretty much on your little page down there. You see as you go down there, what happens as you go down in this physiologic stress response, your body changes enormously when this happens. And it all happens basically inside your brain up here. It's where it's all coming from. Now, I haven't got time to walk you through kind of how your brain's structured and in particular what we call the triune brain, kind of from the bottom up. But you have to understand that when you see back here, okay, now stress can begin in one of three ways. You could get gutted by something like, you can get gored like this, you can get some kind of physical trauma to yourself, and that's going to come right up through your spinal cord, up into an area called the hypothalamus here, which is going to start the stress response and get you going by kicking out chemicals that are going to kick out chemicals from your adrenal glands like cortisol and like adrenaline, and are going to knock you into a stress response. Or you can see somebody coming at you with a knife in their hand, and that's going to tell this little hypothalamus to start the stress response. Or you can just imagine it. You can just conjure it up inside your head. You can conjure up all kind of things to be afraid of. And when we conjure up these thoughts inside of our head that make us afraid, that starts the stress response, just like you'd walked outside the cave and saw a saber-toothed tiger coming at you. And what happens is the hypothalamus begins right here, what we call the HPA stress axis. The hypothalamus sends little hormones down to your pituitary gland. It sits right here. Tells the pituitary gland, oh my God, a saber-toothed tiger is going to get us. And that means you may have just screwed up and made a big mistake on your job. And you're sitting in front of your boss's desk getting ready to get your fanny chewed about something, but your brain doesn't know the difference. It thinks you're being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger. So when that happens, you end up telling that pituitary gland, for God's sake, do something, and it sends a chemical message called adrenocorticotropic hormone down to your adrenal gland sitting on top of your kidneys, and they begin to kick out adrenaline, and they begin to kick out cortisol, and that begins to fire you into a stress response. And when that happens, I've given you a list there on page, that first little page there. When that happens, you begin to get this sympathetic response, this stress response begins to kick in. Now, something else you have to understand too. You think the world stresses you? Think your teacher stresses you? Think your empty-headed roommate stresses you? Think your significant other stresses you? Do you? You think they stress you? Not even close. Epictetus, who was a Greek Stoic philosopher who lived about 2,000 years ago, he was the major advisor to the great Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. That was Richard Harris in the movie Gladiator, by the way, back then. And he wrote this 2,000 years ago when he said, we're not disturbed by things. We're disturbed by our perception of things. You see, the world really doesn't stress you. You stress yourself by what you think and feel about the world. Stress occurs between your right ear and left ear. It doesn't have much to do with what's around you. What you think and feel about the world around you is where stress comes from. I'll give you an example. You think a snake is a pretty significant stressor? If I walked up and dropped a snake in front of you on that table, what do you think the reaction would be in 90 to 95% of the people in this room? You think you'd just reach down there and pick it up? What would happen? The very physiologic stress response I'm going to tell you about would probably happen when you saw that snake. Is that snake making you afraid? Is it? No, of course it isn't. What you think and feel about that snake is where your fear is coming from. That's where the stress is coming from. The snake itself it has no fright in and of itself. I'll tell you, it's one of the stupidest things I ever did. I was teaching I was at LSU Medical School in New Orleans, was teaching a seminar on brain-behavior relationships. I had a bunch of residents in there, a bunch of psychiatry, neurology, PM&R, and I had some postdocs in there too. And we're all talking about, and we got in an argument one time about whether you stress yourself or where the world stresses you. So I brought in an old special forces buddy of mine the next Wednesday afternoon. We did this. And I actually did this. I don't know why I did it. I had this big round table, all these people around this round table. And Mark had this little box, and he turned it upside down. So I'm going to prove to you that the world doesn't stress you stress yourself. He slid the box out, picked up the bottom, and in the lid was about a 3-foot black snake. Now, it isn't as bad as it sounds. We had the snake at about 40 degrees, so it was like going, it was like hardly moving at all. But you should have seen the chairs scoot away from that table. These MDs and PhDs around there, these highly educated people, they're scared. The guy at my 10 o'clock over here fell over the woman next to him. They hit the floor. That's a true story. And the guy at my 2 o'clock nearly passed out looking at this snake. But an instant fear response hit these folks when they saw it because they weren't expecting to see it. When somebody sees a snake, oftentimes there's a tremendous, snake phobia is a pretty huge phobia. And phobia is just the stress response out of control. That's just fear out of control. Well, the story I want to tell you is the woman sitting at my 7 o'clock right here, her name was Jackie. She was a neurology resident. Jackie, when the snake's out there, she just reaches out, picks up the snake behind its head, picks the body up like this, lifts it up, looks at it and says, "Looks like a black snake. What's the big deal?" That's exactly what she said. Well, now, I told Marcus it probably happened because Jackie got her undergraduate degree in zoology at TCU. And guess what's right down the street from TCU? The Fort Worth Zoo, where Jackie had worked in the herpetarium for 3 years, getting her undergraduate degree. She'd been around snakes her whole life. So did that snake frighten her? But it did the other 11 people. Why? Because of what they thought about it and the emotion they engendered out to that. That's where the fear came from. It's an important thing to understand. The vast majority of the reasons you're going to get stressed is not because you've had your gut cut. It's not because somebody's coming after you with a knife. It's because you're conjuring up all these fearful thoughts inside of your head. Your own imagination is where most stress comes from. And there's something you can do about that. You don't need to stress yourself out about stuff. It's your choice. Now, habits get into it. You get a lot of habitual thoughts about this. You ever watch the old TV show Kung Fu? Oh, it was around years ago. David Carradine played this. My brother's a Kung Fu master over in Taiwan. We've been in martial arts for years. But so I'm thinking about this. They had these flashbacks to where this little kid was a little kid and he had this Kung Fu master who was teaching him all the, of course, great secrets of life. But one time he comes in, he's all discombobulated about everything. He's worried about this, he's got this coming, oh my God, this is coming up, I'm worried about that. And he says, you got to help me understand how this happens. And the master said, well, of course I'll help you understand. Sit down, close your eyes, and I want you to imagine a glass bottle, a big glass bottle with a little bitty opening to it. And you're going to take a little baby goose, a little goose chick, and put it inside there. And now, close your eyes, keep it closed. I want you to imagine you keep feeding this goose, and you feed this goose, and it gets bigger and bigger, and pretty soon, the goose is so big it almost fills the bottle. Now, what I would like you to do, Grasshopper, what do you call him, Grasshopper, what I'd like you to do is I would like you to get this goose out of the bottle without hurting the goose and without breaking the bottle. How would you do it? So he's got his eyes closed, imagines, and he's going, oh God, I can't do it. You're going to have to teach me how to do it. And he says, of course I'll help you. I'll teach you how to do it. There, the goose is in the bottle. There, it's out. What'd you just learn? If you can conjure up an imaginary problem with no solution, you can conjure up a problem that's got a solution to it. It's all inside your imagination. It's all in your imagination. So what he tells him is, Grasshopper, worry is a misuse of your imagination. Use your imagination to solve your problem, which is exactly what we're going to get to pretty quickly. Because once you conjure up yourself into this stress state, this is what happens to you. Your heart rate goes crazy. Adrenaline hits your heart. And it starts beating like crazy. Your arteries get big around the heart. They get little around the body. You hold water in your body, fluid retention. Your small arteries shut down out in the extremity, and your blood pressure goes through the ceiling. Next thing that happens is your coronary vessels and your carotids and your vertebral arteries go into your brain. They dilate, so a whole bunch of blood flow now goes to your brain and your heart. Because you're really paying attention to what's going around you when a saber-toothed tiger is getting ready to eat you. You're paying attention to the world. Your blood goes to your big muscles and away from your stomach. Remember I told you it blanched down so you don't see this stuff around. Your stomach shuts down. Your blood clotting factors go sky high. How come? Why? Why do your blood clotting factors go high when you're in a stress response? Why do you think? What your Stone Age body thinks is going to happen to it? You're going to get cut, you're going to get bitten, and you better clot your blood really quickly. Your blood glucose goes sky high. That's blood sugar. So you can't have all this energy to fight or flight this, to get away. Your insulin goes down because insulin is causing you to store glucose into fat into your blood cells, and it wants to empty out all those fat cells. So you're emptying out your fat cells, you're emptying out your glycogen, you have huge amounts of blood sugar now going around in this stress response. Your immune response skyrockets too, and you go into inflammation because you want to keep your immune system really fired up because, man, you might get cut, you might get infected, you might get cut or something, you don't want that to happen. Your endorphins, you know what those are? Endorphin stands for endogenous morphine. You make morphine right inside your head. And your endorphins kick up big time and you go into what's called stress-induced analgesia. Because when you're running away from a saber-toothed tiger and you've had a little ankle sprain the next day, you think you're going to be paying attention to your ankle sprain when you're running for your life? So your pain threshold goes way up. Your lungs get processed better. Your pupils get big and you see what's going on. The frontal lobes of your brain, the control part of your brain, where you think about things and make good rational judgments and all that stuff and control all your impulses, shuts down. And the lower parts of your brain involved in fear and those primitive things drive your behavior because when a saber-toothed tiger is coming after you, you don't want to sit there and think about all your options. You just want to run for your life. So your frontal lobe shut down. And you create tremendously powerful memories about this called flash bulb memories from areas deep called the amygdala and hippocampus in your brain. So you'll remember this if you survive, so you'll know not to have it happen to you again or know how you'll do it next time. All these things are going on in your head. Now think about something. What if you did this to yourself all day long, every day, every day, every day, every day, all day long? Then your blood pressure would go up and it would stay high. You would dilate these arteries to your coronary and cause, with all the pressure in there, they begin to build more muscle and then they begin to shut down to your heart and your brain. So over time, your blood flow decreases. You keep blood away from your gut. So you're not getting nutrients and things to make your stomach and intestines do it, and things like ulcerative colitis, things like Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome begin to develop because you aren't getting enough blood and nutrients around your stomach. Stomach ulcers begin to happen because of this. Your blood clotting factors go sky high. That's great when a saber-toothed tiger's after you, but if this happens all day long, blood clotting is what's going to kill the biggest group of people in this room. There goes a chance you'll have a heart attack. Your blood glucose goes up. And then insulin begins to flip-flop around, so now your blood glucose goes up and you're heading towards diabetes when this happens. One of the major causes of diabetes, chronic stress. Your immune response, over and over again, if you stress yourself out a little bit kind of over and over again all day, you go into inflammation and your autoimmune problems like psoriasis or maybe multiple sclerosis will jump up and things like this will accentuate it. And if you're really badly stressed out, really hugely stressed out, your immune system goes in the toilet and you go into immune suppression, and now you can't fight off diseases and cancer cells and bacteria and viruses and things like that, and you begin to get sick. Study after study tells us that people who stress themselves out, like for a big exam, going for their big, they've got to may take oral exams to get their master's degree or something like that, these people are 7 times more likely to come down with the common cold during that period than somebody not stressing themselves out, because it takes your immune system down. All these, and in particular when it comes to your brain, your frontal lobes, which are shut down in the stress response, begin over time, if you keep stressing yourself, to become less and less and less. And people in chronic stress for 4, 5, 6, 7 years have shrinkage of 4 to 16% in their frontal lobes and some of the memory areas down deep in their brains over time. So your ability now to make good judgments, to take care of those fearful feelings and manage them with your thoughts up here, all begin to go down and begin to get impaired as you're in chronic stress over time. So chronic stress and physical diseases like heart disease and stroke and diabetes and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and pneumonias and cancers are all heavily correlated. And mental disorders based upon extreme fear and the lack of your frontal lobes to control that fear, like anxiety disorders and depression, become huge at this time. Chronic stress, according to a guy named Tom Pearls, who runs the New England Centenarian Study, a study of basically of people that'd be 100 years old. I spent a lot of the last 2 or 3 years looking at people like this, why do these people live so long? Tom believes that chronic stress may be the single biggest killer in our culture, the single biggest killer in and of itself. Today, what we stress ourselves about today is different from the Stone Age. It's a lot different. In the Stone Age, it was pretty much, bad weather could get you, saber-toothed tiger could eat you, some kind of physical conflict with a bunch of other hunter-gatherers that live next to you, some kind of thing like this, a flood. But today, it's kind of different. The major horrible things that can hit us now, that are probably the biggest stressors in the environment we stress ourselves out over, are things like losing a loved one, breakup of a long relationship, something like being a major life-threatening illness of some kind that hits you, or being an Alzheimer's caregiver for somebody that had Alzheimer's disease. These kind of things may be the single biggest major stressors that occur in our culture right now. But they're not the things that most of us stress ourselves out about from day to day to day. That's most of the day-to-day life stuff, like your job, school, what you have to get done and get there, and the grades you got to get, the tests you got to take and all that, money, finances, things like that, significant, and of course, the relationships that we have with each other, constantly going through flux and conflicts and goods and bads and things like this. These are the things we stress ourselves out from day to day about. And remember, our Stone Age brain was never cut out for this. Our Stone Age brain was never designed to wake up and have to worry about, oh my God, I got to get to class this time. Well, if I got enough money, I got to get some breakfast before I head over there this morning. And then after I get that done and my car's not running right, I don't know if I'm going to make it home this weekend. I want to get the car fixed. And it's one thing after another after another. We were never designed to live in a world that bombarded us all day long with stressors like the worlds in the modern worlds we've created now. It's a totally different kind of environment to live in than our Stone Age brains were designed to live in. It's funny though, what happens to you early in life can play a gigantic role in how well or how not well you manage stress. We call these changes epigenetic changes. Your genetic code hasn't changed hardly at all in the last 13,000 years. But as you develop as an individual person, the things that happen to you can cause certain genes to be expressed more and other genes to be suppressed and not expressed much at all. In particular, early in life, often under the age of 5, the kinds of things that happen to you and how well you've been able to handle and deal with these things become markedly important in how the brain structures itself during your development to handle stress. So if there's been significant abuse early on, if there's been tremendous stressors that have bombarded on people that didn't have much control over, then the fearful areas of your brain massively get bigger in size and much more create fear. And the parts of your brain, especially in what I call your frontal lobes up here, your orbital frontal areas, your frontal lobes, that sort of put the brakes on that or manage or control that, become underactive. And those very early experiences can sort of, if you want to use a computer analogy, can sort of hardwire your brain into overly active stress responses and make it much more likely that will evolve to fear way out of control, which is anxiety disorders. And 60% of all anxiety disorders are accompanied by major depressive disorder, by depression. So early on, how your brain develops can make a difference in how you process this stress response. If, on the other hand, you've had some kind of moderate level stressors and you've managed them pretty well, you've learned to kind of manage these things and deal with them, by the time you get into childhood and adolescence and college age and young adulthood, when the stress and crap is coming along, you're pretty much dealing with it. You see, nobody's going to make all these life stressors go away. The whole issue is how you manage them inside and how you think about them and how much you can think your way to control the fear that these things are bringing up inside of you. And that takes practice, just like learning how to run pass patterns or how to hit a baseball or how to kick a soccer ball. It's just a skill that you learn over time and how to manage these things. Early development can play a big role in how well you're able to develop those skills over time. You see what I call the Yerkes-Dodson inverted U. It's a curve you see a lot. It looks like this. Here might be the level of stress we manage it, and it's a curve that kind of looks like this. And basically what it means is, in the term and longevity study, for example, the people who had the longest, healthiest lives weren't the people who didn't worry about anything. They tended to die pretty young. Or the people who worried way too much over here, they tended to die young too. It was the people in the middle who had sort of the normal stuff of life happen to them, but they knew how to manage it. They knew how to deal with it. They knew how to cope with it. Tom Pearls, who runs that New England centenarian study, calls them resilient. Resilient people. One of the key words, and you making it through college without eating your lunch, and making it through the rest of your life without the rest of your life eating your lunch, is how resilient you are and how you can deal with the crap of life and handle it. And a lot of that comes, again, in the skills that you learn early on. Because I'll tell you, it's interesting, Tom Pearls' study, that New England centenarian study, he had 61 people he started with. 3 of these people who had lived to be 100 years old and remarkably healthy people, because we're still rocking and rolling out there. 3 of them were Nazi concentration camp survivors. Maybe one of the worst environments a human being could ever be in. They managed to deal with it, somehow cope with it, leave it behind, and move on. Folks, if there is a secret to life that these longest lived, best, most amazing people on this planet have, who have the longest, healthiest lives, is they have learned to manage the stressors around them, to deal with it, because they aren't going to go away. Death is going to get all of us. The top 5 causes of death all have chronic stress as a risk factor. Heart disease, cancer, stroke, chronic obstructive pulmonary emphysema and all that, and diabetes. That's your top 5 leading cause of death. They all have chronic stress as a major risk factor. So having the longest, healthiest life means a lot about managing the very stressors that bombard us every single day. They aren't going to go away. It's what you think and feel about these things that have more to do with how long that you will live than anything that happens to you. Now, today, in the world we live in now, with the way we're bombarded by stressors around us now, it becomes even more imperative that you understand a little bit about how to manage. And tell you the truth, if you put lipstick on a pig, what do you got? You got a pig with lipstick. Still a pig, ain't it? I mean, whatever it is, what kind of lipstick you put on it. Well, the truth is, all stress management is really just 2 things. Just 2 things. Now, you can dress it up. I've seen at least 50 different packages of this stuff that people preach out there and all that. But the truth is, you treat anxiety, which is fear to the nines, and you treat stress pretty much the same way. Because the first thing you have to do is go back to the very first thing we talked about. There are 3 nervous systems. One's the autonomic, and you're in the sympathetic or parasympathetic, one of the two, and you can only be in one of the two. If somebody's in stress, which one are they in? Sympathetic or parasympathetic? Sympathetic. So what do you think the first thing you have to do is? Get in the parasympathetic. Get in the relaxation state. You can't be stressed and relaxed at the same time. You can just be in one world. So what do? Pretty simply about that, is you teach yourself to relax. Now there are many ways you can do this. One of the progressive muscle relaxation is one where you relax the body like this. Deep breathing is another way you can do it. Concentrate on your breathing significantly. But believe it or not, studies tell us, and I mean literally, the best way to do it is learn to meditate. Mindfulness meditation. Now it comes under, you can call all sorts of other kind of typical types of meditation, transcendental, what do you want to call it. It's all just focusing your attention on one thing. That's really what it's all about. Whether it's your breathing, whether it's a scene on the beach, whatever it is. One of the good things about this is it's some kind of tranquility about this. And when you think, if you focus on nothing but a tranquil thought of some kind, nothing else is getting in your imagination, nothing else is getting in your thoughts. So if you focus that will just ooch you right over into the parasympathetic response, into the relaxation response. Because you're not thinking about anything stressful. You're only thinking about something that to you is very calming. And that's the very first thing that you do. But look what else you're doing. You're not only getting yourself in this parasympathetic state, you're teaching yourself that you can control your thoughts. And pretty soon you teach yourself you not only can control your thoughts, you can control your emotions by your thoughts. And now, instead of you saying, he made me angry, you end up saying things like, I made myself angry at him. Because nobody makes you angry, nobody makes you happy, nobody makes you sad. You do that to yourself by your own thoughts. Your emotions are under your own control. We often use these statements like, he made me mad, she made me upset. That basically every time you say that, you're putting the locus of control of your emotions in somebody else's hands or out there in the world. Nobody controls your emotions but you. Your own thinking does it. And thinking about that you can kind of get yourself, meditate and control your thoughts like that means you can control your thoughts in anything. I was in combat with people that when it started coming down big time, people would just pee. By the way, you know why you pee and poop your pants? Because in a stress response, you don't have control over those. See, once urine gets in your bladder and once poo-poo gets in your colon, it's useless. It's no more use to your body. So you don't hold on to that. You just let it go. Besides, you run away from a saber-toothed tiger, that's a few pounds less you got to carry around, you know. So it just kind of goes, doesn't it? It just kind of lets go. That's why it happens. And yet I saw other people handle it. My secret to that, how I got through combat without getting crazy about it, is I used to think, what would my old man do? My old man was the most put-together person I ever knew. He basically handled pretty much everything that ever happened to him. He always had this old serenity prayer thing. Why worry about something you can't do anything about? And if you do worry about something, only worry about stuff you can do something about. Otherwise, it's useless use of your imagination, just kind of like the goose in a bottle. Well, that's what I used to think about. What would my old man do? Well, he'd shut up and get the job done and then go home. That's kind of what he'd do. We all got these ways of handling it. Once you learn to do that, once you learn to relax yourself, you got to change your thinking. You got to change your thinking because that's what's creating your emotional response, your thinking. The thinking isn't, oh my God, I'm going to flunk this test. This test is horrible. I'm not going to be able to get through this thing. It's going to be awful. I'm never going to make it. All the way to the point is, I'll make this, I'll do okay. I can handle this. This can work. You wake up in the morning sometimes saying, oh, this is going to be an awful day. God, it's going to be pitiful. Everything's going to go wrong today. Everything about it's going to be a big mess for me. I'm hardly going to make it from one part of the day to the other. Life's just going to poo-poo on my head all day long. Or, yeah, it's going to be kind of a mess out there, you know. It ain't going to be the best day I probably ever had, but I'll get through it somehow. We'll make it work some way. I can do this, this, and this to handle it. And at the end of the day, I'm going to go to bed and wake up the next day. It ain't going to be over, okay? These are the same situations you're dealing with, but how you think about them markedly programs your emotional response to it. And the control of fear. You know, you're sitting there right now and you think it's maybe the happiest horse manure you ever heard in your life, but How you think about your fears may have more to do with how happy, contented, and fulfilling your life is than anything else that will ever happen to you. How you manage the stressors of life that are out there threatening you every single day. How you manage these things is how you're going to survive. And the measure of your life, about whether you had a good life, a satisfying life, whether it was a good experience. You think going to college is fun? Do you? You think going to college is fun, or is it a big pain in the butt? Which is it? It's whatever you want it to be. It's whatever you want it to be. Hey, I wish I was back there right now. I played in rock band 6 years, guys. I had a hell of a good time in college. College was a lot of fun for me. I enjoyed a lot of it. Got to play 3 years of college football. I had a good time. I wish I was back there right now. I'd have stayed in college forever. It was a great time as far as I'm concerned. You can make it, but I knew people there miserable, overwhelmed with the whole thing. This is a big pain. Oh, this test, that, that's close. You're going to make it as good as you want to make it. It's really up to you. Nobody else can do it. Nobody can make you happy. You got to do that yourself. And you do it a lot by managing the fears, the things around you that make you fearful and unhappy. You program your own emotions by your own thoughts. Your thoughts are your choice to make them. So this stress response is unbelievable. It's about your survival back in the Stone Age. Today, when this gets out of control, this is the kind of anxieties and chronic stress issues and depressions that begin to affect people especially. And guess what time you're most tempted by things like anxieties and addictions and all that? That's when you go into college. Major college can be a major stressor that you have to manage one way or another by your own thinking. That's the only way you get yourself through it. Any questions before you're out of here? Y'all look like the flat butt syndrome's consumed all of you. Memory really, by the way, the next time you take a test, memory's not in your brain, it's back here. The longer it's flat, the less you learn. Remember that. Thanks for coming.
Students at TLU engage in high-impact educational experiences that include civic engagement, aesthetic expression, critical thinking, and a focus on intercultural knowledge in a community that welcomes the interplay of faith and reason.